All right, this is what most people are probably waiting for, the Cordovan department. I should probably also caveat there's like a lot to this. So it's very, it's not simple to explain the Cordovan tanning process because it takes 6 months, 2 months of which we already saw in the basement in those pits. Perfect. Perfect examples here. You may, if you want to rewind the video, the leather that they were hanging into the pits in the basement sort of looked like a figure-8 shape. And that was the second stage of the tanning process. I think I said appropriately earlier. The first stage is actually this. So they tan it once in those pits, and they come up with something that looks like this. This is actually where the shells are, but you cannot see them currently. So this department, or this section of the department called shaving, is where they start to expose where that Cordovan is. And this is the coolest part. Here's one that has already been, they call this liquor shaving. So these have already been shaved. If you have a really keen eye and kind of know what you're looking for, you might be able to see a difference in the density and appearance of the fibers here. And also note that this is on the suede side. This is on the rough outside. Oh no, I got my greasy fingers on there. Not gonna matter. This is on the rough outside of the leather. This is actually the grain. So they're coming at the shell from the suede side. If you look closely, and I should probably wash my hands after this, you can see this line here. See how a little bit of different color has happened? And if I were to draw it out for you, it sort of looks like that. And that's where your shells are. There's one on this side and one on this side. They do not connect in the center. You can, in fact, probably see the difference in density between the middle section there. And you're also left with this big section across the top that is also not shell. And we will use that. In fact, we've got a limited release coming out this week out of that section of leather. We call it horse butt. The tannery often markets them as horse butt strips. That's what it is. It's a big mustache shape we can look at in a sec. I really want to wash my hands though. Thanks for not following me into the bathroom. Just give you a quick demo. These are the horse butt strips that I was referencing a moment ago. This is the part that is not shell on the horse butt. And they fit alongside this. Two of these, in fact. So that piece of shell would fit underneath each of the obvious sections on the strip. So the whole part together was what we were just looking at, that they're shaving. They're just trying to find out where the shell is and where it isn't, so they can only work with the shell. We're really trying to isolate the Cordovan, because that's the treasure, that's the gold mine that they're trying to dig for. And it gets treated completely differently than the horse butt strip here. So we're gonna go over to the next part of the Cordovan department. That is, what?
40 minutes.
We're good? Yeah, we're good. We got plenty of time. This is the fastest tour I've ever given. It's like a real crash course in tanning. But the other part of the building here on this floor is the second half of the Cordovan department. It's like kind of good and bad that we're here at lunchtime because it's quiet, but it's also nice to see them doing their thing. I'll do my best to describe how they do it. We're also passing by a bunch of football leather here. I know it looks orange, and it kind of is. That's actually the leather that they use for college footballs at Wilson. There's technically another drying method, but this is another pasting method that they do. They call this cold pasting. So anything that is sensitive to heat, they'll do in this room that's not heated. or anything that's super heavy and intense that they can't fit on those frames of the pasting unit, they have a tendency to fall off in the unit. This is better for being a little more delicate. So here's where we get like into the wizardry, in my opinion. It's sort of like, I view this section as like a steakhouse, where you're taking the shells once they've been exposed and shaved down. And this is where we do what you would consider it if we're considering the rest of the path that we just looked at. This is like the retanning for cordovan, except it's all done by hand. So they'll take these horse butts, inside of here is the shell, lay them up on these tables, and you take a brush, dip it in the tanning mixture, and brush it onto the leather. And this is an old school process called currying. And the magic part of it is it actually will tan sitting in these stacks. So for a bunch of years, I thought this was bogus. I was always thinking, like, why wouldn't you just turn, you already spent all this money to buy the hides, you already spent all this money, 2 months to tan it in these pits. Why not just get it out the door? But they will actually sit here for another several months and basically even out. So all that hand currying of oils evens out over the shells. In fact, it's very dense, so it takes a little bit of extra time. And I've noticed, I used to think this is BS, but the longer it sits, the better the result, the better the leather is. So right now it's a day before tax day, it's April 14th. These were done on April 8th, and if we go farther down, that's March, January. Here's some from December. So you can see that these have just been sitting here getting nicer and nicer as they sit. Here's some from November. So once those have cured, they'll actually take them back to the shaving section, shave them again, and come back over here. There's a bunch, this is where it gets crazy, because there's a bunch of processes. But I like, it's a little dark over there, we can show you where they put the stains on. And it sure would be nice to show you this when they're doing stuff, so maybe we'll do it again. This machine over here on the side is what's called a brush finish machine. Not like this really matters. So inside of here is a pan, usually, that sits underneath this corrugated roller. And that corrugated roller picks up the different stains that are heated in, again, a jacketed kettle. So we need to have some heated dyes to make sure that they penetrate the leather properly. It rolls onto the corrugated roller, hits another brush, and then lays it out onto the leather, runs through this bolster. People will hand swab it as it comes out, and then they hang it on these sticks to dry across this whole aisle. So you can see up there, maybe you can't, it's dark. We've got some more steam lines that have super old world fans that must be 100 plus years old, rotating above them, all the way across. So after the dye's applied, they dry it down this stick dryer, and they sort of come out like this. Although this is natural, so there was no color added for here. These, also natural. They will hang them again on hooks to dry after the stick dryer. These do not look like they had any stain applied. The other fun one that gets a ton of people freaked out on social media are the glazing jacks and the rolling jacks. One thing that I think is super cool to think about is this building started before the industrial, or like during the Industrial Revolution. So you'll see a lot of old pulleys and belts that drive these machines. So in the case of this, you got a glazing jack that has a belt tied to it that ties to that pulley, that has another belt that ties to a motor up right above you. So this motor is driving that belt, which drives that pulley, and that pulley has a shaft that drives all these pieces, and you just clutch them into place. So there's like a little clutch that you put the belt to make the thing go. But the thing that I think is mind-blowing is back then, this whole building was steam powered. So they would shovel coal, make steam, and then drive one big one of those that fed all the other floors. So it was basically just belts and pulleys and shafts that were driving the whole place. I like to think about that a lot because I think it's so wild. But these days you have a direct drive motor, so these are all electric motors. You don't need the steam necessarily. Back to the jacks. So there's two different types of jacks here. One of them, this one is called a rolling jack. The other one is called a glazing jack. The rolling jack has this chrome wheel that actually spins as it rotates. It's kind of in a tough position right now. But that will spin and it softens out the leather. All right? So they will roll the cordovan. And then close to the end of the process, after the leather has had stain applied to it, here, they do a final polishing on these glazing jacks. Now these have a glass rod that is fixed inside of this head. You see it in there? It's a piece of glass. So this is smooth, it doesn't spin like the rolling jack. That presses down as it moves. And it will press down into this bed. And that applies a little bit of force, and then that smooth glass on top of it polishes the leather. They use a little bit of Venetian cream to glaze the leather in. That's pretty much all it is up here that we can show you for the moment.